Podcasting from Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. This is connecting your community, building community through unity. Getting things done takes activism, and Blaine Higgin and Mallory Christiansen have come together to share firsthand community voices, bringing awareness to community issues, watching how other communities handle like problems, and sharing their successes. Connecting your community. Here are your hosts, Blaine Higgin and Mallory Christiansen.
Mallory, here we are. It is New Year.
Yeah.
And how exciting is this? It is, you know, one of the most exciting things of the new year?
Which? Team Canada.
Team Canada.
They rock.
They rock.
Yeah.
Pull off this win and in the gold medal game now.
Yes.
How exciting
that's
is that,
huge.
right?
That's
Go Canada.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, that's super exciting,
Yeah,
right?
So happy New Year, you
Happy
guys.
New Year.
Yes, happy New Year.
Today's a really special day for us, Blaine, and we are hosting someone who I believe, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I believe is someone who's an expert in the field of FASD, someone who has overcame addiction, someone who's overcame homelessness, someone who has a story that I don't believe we share enough to raise that awareness about individuals who have recovered, who are now giving back to the street population right now. So,
Excellent.
You know, I'm so honored if you can introduce yourself and tell viewers who you are.
My name is Vin White Buffalo. Yes, I'm a former street person and a former addict as well. That was many years ago. I've since pulled myself out of those ruins with the help of the community at large.
Yes.
I've since then been successful in living like everybody else, and I now contribute my time by going back to the streets and giving what I can back to those people and showing them that there is hope and there is a way for them to end their plights and become working members of society.
Yes, and you are a shining example of that. So,
Thank you.
How did you guys meet, Mallory?
Yes, great question. Absolutely great question. Do you want to share how we met?
Well, yes, I work for Aware, and that's an organization through Arches. And we were out, we're street teams, and we go out through the community, and we just hand out just little food items, and we give advice, and we lend an ear to those out on the streets. And we were at the provincial building downtown, and I believe we were speaking with a young woman at the time, and I saw Valerie come up, and she was giving another individual a ride to the building, and we just sort of crossed paths, and she said hi, and I said hi.
That's weird for Mallory to do that, right?
I'm always go like, just, hey, how's it going? I'm Mallory, right? But,
right. And so we just had a brief interaction then, and she told me what she does, and I told her what we were doing, and obviously she was there to see what we were doing, and she was interested. And asked me if I would be open to perhaps joining you guys on this podcast, which brings us here today.
Yes, and it's
fantastic.
Beautiful. What I just want to say too is that I think maybe we also had some misconceptions about each other and the work that we did, right? Because you know, a lot of people, and just to be short, is a lot of people think that, oh, she's someone that's anti-harm reduction or whatever the case is, when, you know, again, I'm here to advocate for a 4-pillar model.
Yes.
And for yourself, you've had a lot of also even your own misconceptions because you are seen downtown pushing a wagon with human basic needs and resources and referrals, whereas some people believe that you're actually handing out needles.
Yes.
We've had those questions actually, and that's exactly right. That the person that is down in Galt Gardens and in the areas is passing out needles.
Right.
That's pulling a wagon, and that's absolutely not true in hearing that. And so it's. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Right. Yeah, that would be a myth. Yeah, that is complete myth. Get it out of your heads. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
We are against handing out needles. That to us is enabling. And as former street people and homeless people ourselves, we know that we didn't get to where we are today by being enabled to continue in our addictions and our habits that brought us to homelessness. We understand that there may be organizations that think they're doing the community a service by handing out needles and whatnot, but we are not one of them. We, in the winter times, will hand out gloves, we'll hand out toques, we'll give out...
on that, sorry to interrupt, where do these toques and these gloves and stuff come from? Where do you find the supplies to be able to hand out?
We have a budget. Yeah,
okay.
We have a budget, and we've always got a few $1,000s in our budget, and so that enables us to go out to Walmart's to buy what we see the street people need. And I think that's just it too. We have our ears to the ground. We have a very we have a good understanding of what they need during the summers and
being
winters.
that you've been through this yourself as well, right?
And they also tell us what they need to.
Right.
You know, if it's a cold day and they're like,
Absolutely.
where are the gloves? You know, well, we need to go buy gloves, and so our next walk we'll bring our gloves out.
So while we're on that topic, can we invite people to provide you guys donations? Like if they're like, hey, guess what? We just went through all of our winter wear. Can we give it to someone? We have people looking constantly.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you have any donations and whatnot, by all means, come down to Arches, bring up a wear. We definitely take donations in. We go through our supplies just so fast. I mean, you would not believe how fast we go through our supplies. And so we're always open for donations.
Right.
Our greatest needs at this point are socks, summer or winter. Socks are always something to have for them.
Right.
And of course, gloves and toques and scarves. But then also just little things like feminine products. We hand out feminine products to the women. And we also do cleaning supplies like toothbrushes and things like that. So, I mean, we're open to little things like that. We hand out cookies and things like that, but we have a budget for that. And we also have donations to the food bank that we're able to rely upon as well.
Oh, that's excellent.
Absolutely. So any gloves, toques, if you have them, bring them.
Yeah.
It's like its own community collaboration right there, right? Just working with different organizations, even the food bank, to help you make sure that those basic needs for individuals that are on the streets are actually being met, right? So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a team effort. It's a team effort. Yeah.
And it's a community effort.
It's a community
really.
effort. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know off camera we were talking a little bit about your past and some of these different, and I thought this would be fantastic to speak to. And if you're comfortable, please, a background and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. Well, I guess my story would start where everybody's story begins, and that would be the day we were born. Yeah. The day I was born, apparently, as I found out later in life, I was born to alcoholic parents. My mother was an alcoholic. And apparently she consumed alcohol while my twin and I'm a twin, and so we were in the womb while she was consuming. And so upon being born, we were given up to a white family here in Lethbridge, actually. And as I found out years later, it was also part of the 60s Scoop program as well.
Okay.
So I think
part of that.
Yeah, there were two reasons. One, because my parents were alcoholics. And I think the government saw an opportunity to come into and intervene. And I think they were their ultimate gain was to save us. Their goal was to save us. But also the 60 Scoop program was running strong. And I believe that ended back in 1983.
Absolutely.
Right. And so
it lasted a long time, right?
It really did, longer than it really should have.
Right.
Yes.
But yeah, so I was part of that program as well. I was placed in a white family. And I will mention that this was a really good white family. They were a great family, a hardworking, blue-collar family. We lived over on the north side. And from there, we moved up to the Crow's Nest Pass. My dad was a heavy-duty mechanic, and we always took holidays out west into the Crow's Nest Pass, out into British Columbia, into Kelowna and whatnot. We did that every summer. And my father's heart, I mean, we used to hunt all the time. And so his heart really was in the mountains. And so when he had the opportunity to relocate the family up into the mountains, he took it.
Right.
He got a job out at the mines out in British Columbia as a mechanic out there. And so, yeah, we picked up from Lethbridge and we moved out to the Crow's Nest Pass. Okay. And it was just wonderful. I mean, being a city boy, going out into the mountains, it was just like, wow.
So did you like the mountains?
I loved the mountains.
That's where I grew up in Sparwood, just close by Crow's Nest Pass.
Right. And we played a lot of Sparwood teams.
Right.
But yeah, it was a wonderful time. And it was a very strong family at the time. I loved it. And they were very nurturing to us, my twin and I growing up. They saw some gifts and talents in myself. I was a budding archaeologist. They could see that when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And so when we took our holidays out to Dinosaur Park and whatnot out by Drumheller, I was in heaven, obviously, but they saw those talents. And so they were very nurturing to that end. I was musically gifted and inclined, and so they poured a lot of money and energy into that as well. I played hockey. I played a lot of sports growing up. We did a lot of camping trips and whatnot. So, I mean, to me, it was just an idyllic family.
Yes.
They never ever made me feel worthless or less than I am because of the color of my skin or where I came from. And I fit very well. My twin and I fit so well in our community. We were known as the twins. My twin was always a clown, and we got along in school just greatly. We had a ton of friends.
Yeah.
But eventually it all ended. It came to an end. In the midst of all of that goodness, there was a family friend of my father's, and his son, he was an abuser. He sexually abused children, and my twin and I were two of his victims. And so when we moved up to the Crow's Nest, it started here in Lethbridge. Their family lived close by to us. And so when we moved up to the Crow's Nest Pass, I thought we'd left that nightmare behind. Unbeknownst to me, that family also got a job out at the mines as well. So they relocated up to the Crow's Nest. And so a few months later, they showed up. And so the abuse picked up and continued. And it also went just beyond our family, and it went to others in the community as well. And so that had a profound effect because that carried on into our young teens.
Right.
And as my twin and I found out, as we started discovering our friends that were being abused, we formed our own little group, and we decided that we were going to inform the authorities, tell our parents, go to our teachers, all our victims, my twin and I. Yes, from one
That's in
offender.
70s, early 80s probably, right?
80s, absolutely, it was in the early 80s.
And to come forward, that is amazing to have that group of...
We took it upon ourselves because we had one of two options at the time. And understand we were teens, we were children. And so it was, we decided that we were neither going to blackmail the guy or we were going to expose him.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we thought, well, let's expose him because he was already being kind to us by buying us pops and candy and things like that. He was very kind. And so we thought, well, let's expose him. Let's put an end to all of it. And so we did just that. We took it upon ourselves. We went to our teachers. We went to the police. We went to anybody who would listen. And we thought that would maybe bring things to an end, and it certainly didn't. The Crow's Nest, at that time, there were a lot of people working in the mines. And so when the exposure started to become public, I don't know how it worked, but it just, you had the police and everybody just sort of hush hush.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. You hear so much of that back in that 70s, 80s, where a movement wasn't strong enough to be able to understand these concerns that were coming forward. And they would just, as you said, would hush it, brush it under the rug. And it's incredible that it would go on to multiple individuals as well, many teenagers, many of your friends, right?
I think, as I was explaining to you earlier, the Crow's Nest at that time was a union town. Right. And so back in those days, the union had a lot of strength.
Absolutely.
They had a lot of power. I think they were able to manipulate politics to the highest level at that time because it was the union that actually directed pretty much the authorities at that time to just end it. There were under the table deals that were made that allowed this man to pretty much go scot-free. When it went to courts, we were not allowed to testify. As children, as victims, we were not allowed to testify. And this guy, I think he was let go, and he was told to leave town and never come back. And so that's what happened to him. And so we were left with the fallout. He destroyed many lives, and that whole town, I mean, they experienced the fallout of that. But in the years since then, I've learned that the union really had a lot of influence, and I think had they not been there, things would have came out in our favor, the victims' favor. But yeah, the union had a lot of pullback in those days, and it certainly reared its ugly head when it came to when it came for us to seek justice. None of us received justice. And since then, you know, some of the kids that I used to play hockey with, they killed themselves. Some of them ended up dying on the streets.
As a result
As a result
sexual
of
As
assault.
a result of the abuse, but more so because there was no justice on their behalf. Their stories were never told. They had to live with the hurt. At the time, we were not directed to I would consider proper help. We were given up to see counselors that were, I think, unqualified to deal with sexually abused children, right? I think they were more in tune to dealing with adults that were dealing with work-related issues and maybe family-related issues and whatnot. They certainly had not dealt with any sexual abuse victims, and certainly not teens full of angst and anger. So we were just left to the wolves, as it were.
Absolutely, you were.
Yeah.
So, Vin, we talked about we talked about how we met, the work that you're doing downtown, all of this. Okay, so before we take a break, we want to just ask you to let anyone who may be in right now that is and has been a victim of sexual assault, what would you say to someone that's watching this podcast right now that may have struggled, what you had to go through as a child, as a youth? What would you say to that person?
Well, if you're a child or if you're a youth out there and you're in the midst of all this darkness that involves various types of abuses from adults, if you're in the system right now and you feel that you're being pulled from side to side by the system's mandates, group homes and whatnot, I think the greatest advice that I could probably give you would be to survive, live, don't give up, don't die. Understand that as a child, you're rightfully in the arms of the government and whatnot. They have a duty and a requirement to see that you reach adulthood. They're not mandated as to how you get there. They're only there to make sure you get there. So my advice would be to just live, survive, bear patience, and do what I did. I gleaned, I took every cent I could from the government. I took advantage of every program they ever had.
Because they do have a lot of different programming
Oh, they
running, right?
certainly do. Yeah,
And
we live in a very generous society. Canada is very generous. We're very rich, and it really does show in the vastness of the system that we do have.
Absolutely.
As a child, I think if you're in the system, you don't see the whole picture. You may see group homes and you may see programs and whatnot, but it's all interconnected.
Need to embrace those programs that are available out there.
You really do. And by doing so, it's going to, I think, help give you that objective to get you to the age of 18. And understand that you're not going to be a child forever.
Absolutely.
You're going to be an adult, and you will be taking the roles that you see those adults around you living right now. So my advice would just to be survive, live, do whatever it takes to live.
So prior to the break, I just want to take just 1 minute to. So you talked about the concerns and about the abuse, et cetera, that happened, and now we know that in time you became homeless and some of the concerns that you had. Could you take us from that time of that abuse? Was a deciding factor to bring you to homelessness, et cetera, later in your life? Or so just a quick minute if you want to take and just talk a little bit about that.
Well, what the abuse did to me on a personal level is it just filled me with so much anger and so much hate. You know, as young adults, I don't think if I was raised in a normal home, I would have had to carry that burden. But we are burdened with just things as children we just do not understand fully, like hate, like anger to that degree. And that really showed to people around me. And they took that as a sign of rebellion rather than hurt, right? And so as a result of that, I didn't just become homeless for the sake of being homeless. I didn't become homeless because I just walked into it. I became homeless because the system let me down. The system at the age of 17 said, listen, we've had enough of you. You're on your own. We'll give you aftercare support and so forth, but you're on your own. So the system was the one who kind of bum rushed me out the door. And I was on the streets, street kid at the age of 17 because of them, because I was in their system and that's where they left me. And so I had to take that responsibility of being on the streets and learning how to survive away from that system that had taken care of me for so many years.
We are seeing right now the influx of children who are transitioning out of care, like yourself, who have lived in the system their whole life, no support, Okay, no worker after the age of 18 or 24, depending on how long that particular organization takes them and keeps them for. But I guess it's ultimately going back is that we are failing and we don't have enough effective programming for children who are aging out of the system. But we also need to focus on, you talk so much about sexual assault, is that we have resources even in Lethbridge.
Yes.
Okay. We have victim services through Lethbridge Police if you decide to go that route. But you can call Darcy James at Victim Services and get set up, right? And we have this Chinook Sexual Assault Center now up and running in Lethbridge, one of the first of its kind, actually.
It's amazing.
Christine Casey is an extraordinary advocate.
Wow.
And you can be under the age and still come forward and have a safe place.
They won't turn anyone away.
They won't.
For sure.
And your options are made available to you, whether you go through the justice system. I know I did, right? I charged my offender. But for anyone who's struggling and going through sexual assault, you are not alone.
Amen.
And that sexual assault does not define you. And there is support. And if you are here locally in Lethbridge, there is so much support.
Absolutely.
So why don't we take a break and then we'll come back and we will discuss a little bit more about who you are and everything about you, Vin.
Thank you.
This is Connecting Your Community with Blaine Higgin and Mallory Christiansen. We'll be right back after these messages.
There's a new art shop in town.
What?
Watercolors, acrylics, pastels, brushes, oils, canvas, and paper.
Oh, where?
It's new, the art room at Smith's Audio on 13th Street North.
For high performance sound.
And super art supplies.
At Smith's Audio on 13th Street North, we promise to only sell high-performance electronics. We promise to support mostly Canadian companies like Paradigm, Anthem, NAD, Bryston, and PSB. We keep promises. Smith's Audio, 13th Street North. Electronics simplified.
Thank you. We also always want to thank our sponsors for what they do to help us continue doing what we're doing. So thank you very much to Smith's Audio and the Art Room.
Yes, absolutely. So it's been quite a heavy podcast already, right? We've talked about sexual assault. We've talked about everything that you've gone through. And this is just like a part 1 of 2, I believe, that we're going to have with
absolutely.
you. Because
of 3, of 4.
Yeah, who knows, right? Every
Ongoing.
time that we keep talking, there's so much more that you have survived in life. And we just need to be able to shed that awareness, right? So let's talk a little bit about, when did you first become really entrenched in your addiction? What happened? Can you just give us a little summary of...
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's innocent enough, my story, in terms of how I slid into my addiction. Growing up in the Crow's Nest Pass, we were not as entertained as maybe our city brethren were. There are a lot of bush parties out there in the mountains. And when I was about 14, 15, we started hitting the bush parties. And it was just innocent. We'd go out and have, crack a few beers, sit around the bonfire, get loaded, sing songs, wrestle, just things like that. From that, it went into house parties. It turned into going to house parties after that, then bush parties. And it just seemed like it was just one party after another. My whole life just became one big party. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was a drunk. I was drinking all the time. I also, too, with the anger that I was dealing with through being sexually abused, at that time in my teens, I was also very reflective of the fact that I was living with a white family. And so I was dealing with, I think, feelings of abandonment.
Of course.
The insecurities that go along with that, not knowing where my roots are, growing up in a white family, being Native, First Nation. So it was just a witch's brew of excuses to sort of get drunk. Later on, I think when I realized at some point that I needed to stop drinking, and I couldn't stop. I was looking for stupid excuses to keep on drinking. I found myself working at a liquor store even.
Oh, convenient.
Right, yes. And
look at all this alcohol. This is awesome.
Right, yeah. And so I was stealing Mickeys and drinking on shift. And it got so bad. And when you're on the streets living with these addictions and you want success so bad, but it just seems so far out there in the galaxy, and you have to look at the reasons why.
Absolutely.
And drinking was one of the main factors for me. And so when I was in my early 20s, I think I started just to maybe mature. I'm not sure, but I realized at that time, in order to reach my goals, I would have to really cut some things in my life that were keeping me from that. And at the time, drinking was certainly the main thing. And so I went and I did my 28 days just outside of Lethbridge here.
28 days for what? For just in case people may not understand the terminology.
Yeah, if you're serious about not drinking and that, they've got all these various programs around the province, and some of them are, I think, 28 days, 2 months, 6 months, depending on maybe the level of your addiction and whatnot. But I think first and foremost, like they've got like 28-day programs through ADAC and whatnot.
Right.
And I was encouraged to check one of those out, to check myself into one of these homes and live there for 28 days.
Yeah.
And work the program. And at the time, I wasn't gung-ho about it, but I also realized too that if I was going to stop drinking, this was maybe the approach that would work for me. Right. I had tried quitting on my own. I quit smoking on my own. I mean, that seemed easy enough, but drinking was just another thing entirely. And I realized that this demon was just far too big for me to take on myself. And so when this program was offered to me, I thought, okay, well, I will definitely check it out. And I did, and it was the best decision I'd ever made. It wasn't anything like I thought it would be. It was like going to summer camp. It really was. It was
the
just
28-day treatment center.
It
was like
really
summer
was.
camp?
It was like summer camp. They get you up early in the morning, which I wasn't used to. You get to walk your mile every morning and get fresh air. But the best part was that I was surrounded with like-minded people.
And was it a cold turkey?
It was a cold turkey approach. Yes, it is.
Okay. That must have been a struggle to start. I mean, the 28 days, probably by the end it would have been that much easier, but right at the beginning, because you were quite far into that addiction.
Right.
And
the cold turkey keep you busy. The second you walk through those doors, they keep you busy and they keep you occupied. And that's one of the first lessons I've learned as an addict is that when you're taking something away from yourself, you've got to fill that gap with something. Right. You're taking away one habit that has just dogged you and has proven itself dark and destructive. And so they're taking that away and they're showing you all the ways that you can fill that with just positivity.
Okay.
And with just love and understanding. And there's a science behind addiction that they bring to light. And so if you're science-minded or psychology-minded and whatnot, it's a really great place to really understand yourself and the science behind addiction and how it affects our bodies and the history of alcohol and alcoholism and just all of that.
So you talk about this addiction and sorry to interrupt, but I'm thinking back to when you mentioned that you were a twin.
Yes, I am.
So through all of this time and your addiction, your twin is, and I know there's quite a tight bond between twins.
Yes, to a fault.
What was happening to a fault?
Yes.
What was happening during your addiction time? Is that something you're okay to speak about?
Yes, I can. Yeah. Again, it comes down to I think your personal decisions. Really, I mean, my twin and I were very tight. We were inseparable. We were indistinguishable as children. We used to switch classes and right.
It's identical twins.
Identical,
okay.
right? And so we would switch classes and see how long it would take for the teachers to realize that hey, you're not that guy. You're his twin. You better get back. Yeah. So we were like that. When he broke a bone, I felt it. And that still continues to
That's
this
incredible
day.
Because I've heard a lot about that.
I mean, I'm science-minded, and so there's a science behind twins as well. And I've been able to really delve into that, sometimes unwillingly, because again, if your twin breaks a bone and you feel it, I mean, that's nothing that you ask for, but it happens, right?
Yeah. Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Did your brother struggle with addiction like you did?
Yes, he has. He has absolutely struggled with addiction. And he still continues to struggle with addiction to this day.
Where is your brother?
I believe at the moment he's at River House.
River House, okay.
Right.
And if you explain a little bit about
Can you
River House, just so...
River House now?
Yeah, River House is I would like to say group home. I think they've got like it's a 3-stage living program. And to my understanding, it's a place where alcoholics can book themselves into, and they will treat you with dignity and respect. You can carry your addictions with you. And if you
So it's not a cold turkey.
It's not a cold turkey, absolutely not. They will accommodate you in your addictions. Their aim is to see that if you're going to die, you will die with dignity.
Absolutely.
You'll die in a warm bed.
So different from the approach that you had.
Absolutely, yeah. But to be fair, again, like I said, it's a 3-tier. So if you choose to want to quit, they will certainly accommodate you, and they will help you to quit. But if you're like my twin and you don't want to quit, well, then they'll certainly accommodate you to that end as well. And I think their philosophy is that rather than him drink and die out there on the cold streets, let's bring him. So that he has the comfort,
roof over the head,
right? So that he can die in dignity, right? And know that he's surrounded by.
But some have been there for years and years, so they continue this, this support to die with dignity for sometimes 15, 20, 25 years.
But what I will say is that River House actually used to be called Broussard House. So it's somewhat of a fairly new initiative here in Lethbridge. It's been around for a few years, and actually I have a tattoo because a really dear friend of mine actually was a resident there, and he really touched my life. But anyway, what for me it is, especially as a frontline worker, people who stay in there, is it's a place where a lot of the guys who are now there were living on our streets chronically.
Yes.
They faced extensive chronic homelessness, and there were failing support services miserably for a lot of the guys who have transitioned in and out of River House, because some have got sober in River House and now are living on their own. Some need River House because it's a 24-hour supportive house where they have a managed alcohol program. However, if you are trying to wean off of alcohol or any type of substance, it takes a lot of courage to stay in a residence in a supportive living because everyone around you is drinking, right? But I can't say enough about River House solely for the fact that I've seen individuals who have had meaningful life and given that dignity that they deserved, especially through their chronic addiction.
No, and that's we talk over the past about some of our differences. I have a very different opinion on River House, and that's a whole nother topic.
Right?
It's a whole other topic, and because I do see the enabling side to it, and I don't. Maybe enabling is the wrong way. If you're going in for help, as you had mentioned, Vin, it will keep you comfortable in what you're doing. I struggle with that. I struggle with sometimes the cost that is involved, and how many more individuals could we help with that same funding source? But that's a topic completely in itself. But I do know that there's the help, and I
think one key component to keep in mind here is that prior to my twin going to River House, he was a throwaway.
Right.
He was a throwaway. I mean,
What do you mean by that?
society just threw him away. It was.
And I don't believe it's their fault.
It was okay for my twin to sleep behind churches and behind dumpsters in the dead of winter.
Right.
Okay, society was okay with that. Right. River House, they're not okay with that. And so I'm sort of divided. You're right. I mean, to some degree, they do enable some of their people to continue with that habit onto death, right? And I do disagree with that component, that aspect of their program. But they also took my twin off the streets and are keeping him safely under their roof. And so he's no longer a throwaway. And they encourage him daily to see himself not as a piece of garbage, but as someone who deserves to be treated with dignity and respect.
Okay.
I think through their actions, by giving him a bed and by getting him up and encouraging him to say, visit me or go to the YMCA to go for a swim, to go for walks.
Get some meaningful daily activity in there, right?
But and good daily meaningful activity, like not just being a taxi service driving people. Oh, hey, I'm going to go take you to McDonald's and there's your day-to-day activity today, right? It's actually meaningful.
Vin, a question that I have is as a counselor for the city, I know some of the things you do downtown, and I thank you for it, you and your team. Is there anything else that council could do to support what you're doing, or is there anything that you want to talk about as far as support from that side?
Well, I'm unfamiliar with I think all that council's doing, other than what I read in the papers and hear on the news. I also know too that it's not just the city's issue; it's also the province's issue.
Absolutely.
And as a province right now, we're facing so many shortfalls and program cuts that is affecting, I think, the limit to what council can do. It took a community to get me off the street.
That's right.
It took an entire community to help and aid me get off the streets.
Right.
And what I'm seeing right now is the community just backing off. I understand too that what we're going through as a city has just sort of hit us overnight. I mean, it just came out of nowhere.
It really
Right.
did. All of a
did.
sudden, boom! Here's a massive empire that's going to change the community.
It blindsided us, and I think that put us in an unfair position.
You're right.
It blindsided us.
It does.
It put us in an unfair position.
But I think when we talk about this the concern that we're going through now, and I mean, let's call it what it is the huge addiction issue that we're having. Mm-hmm. And honestly, out there, a lot of this online talk is because of needle debris and needle stuff happening throughout the community and stuff. And I think that's probably a big part of it. There's a frustration because there's obviously, okay, we don't want needles to be passed out and about. We do believe in harm reduction, but to go out and then enable. You spoke a little bit too about some of the concerns of just enabling, and actually getting some of the other services that are important, because to continue doing that is a concern in itself. And I think any of the emails and the calls that I get as a counselor is the concerns of enabling and keeping this going forward rather than helping that person and helping these people out there. And you've spoke a little bit to me about that and how important it is to the other services.
Yes.
But it's also important to look at the effectiveness of services, right? Because we have a lot of organizations that we know are in the community right now, and it's not just one particular organization. There are many that we need to start actually critically evaluating what are the supports that are being provided. Are they actually reintegrating individuals? Are they actually providing preventative and intervention programming to help make individuals feel like they are deserving of being contributing members of society, right?
Yes.
Well, we spoke about the Sage Clan before, right?
Yes.
And this group that is out helping, and there are, was it 11 people? 11 people they have helped with their support services, etc. You talk about yourself, Vin, downtown, helping those and passing out with the gloves and the socks and the necessities that these people need. This is incredible, and I know we spoke as well in the past about getting these people into the services. I mean, I don't know much more to say than that is to help them on that road to recovery.
If I may interject.
Absolutely.
We need to talk about effectiveness of programming right now. We really do.
Yeah.
Well, there's another side to this story that I don't think that has been brought up at all.
Okay.
And it's a little bit maybe controversial, but there's also an overpopulation issue that's going on just south of us on their reservation with the blood reservation, and we're getting a lot of overflow from that population as well.
Okay.
And with that, they're bringing their habits. I know for a fact that many of the pharmaceutical drugs and some of the drugs that are flooding our streets are coming directly across the borders.
Absolutely, there
from the reservation, right?
Just in the U.S., the reservation.
From this blood reservation and also my reservation, the Piikani reservation, because my reservation, we've got the northern Piikani, which is me, but then we've also got my southern brothers, which exist on the U.S. side.
Side, right.
So, and we're able to just flash.
That's like in Browning.
Right.
Right.
And we're able to just flash our status cards and we go across the borders. And we've got two types of security, two-level security cards. One which enables us to just literally just flash it and they'll let us go through without being searched or anything, right?
Okay.
So
this is an interesting conversation.
That I don't think any of us have been talking about.
But there's a lot of drugs coming in through that. And as well, you have to look at the reservation program. I mean, that what is 110, 120-year-old failed government experiment, the reservation. Okay, really, you have to look at it like that. It's a failed experiment by the federal government that was designed to at first annihilate us, and when that couldn't be done, it was to isolate us.
Absolutely.
Right.
And when these reservations were first designed over 100 years ago, they were isolated. They were away from city centers and towns. In the 21st century, we now see our cities growing
Absolutely.
to include these reservations now. And with the population explosion going on with my people, which is a good thing, we're coming back in numbers. But unfortunately,
Bringing some of those concerns.
well,
that-
they're being born and raised under a system that just is not conducive to what we do out here in the real world, as I like to call it.
Right.
Right. They're everything about them is just different than how we do things, and so they come to our city with these habits and ideas, and they're uneducated in the ways of the white man, as it were. Uneducated in how we carry our politics out here, how our work ethics are, and just all of that, right? How to maintain apartments, and just little things that we get growing up, they don't necessarily, not to the degree and standards to which we are used to, or that we have set for ourselves.
We really need
This
to.
is
We
to
honestly, I'm
we
like,
are-
this is
oh,
part one
We're
of
struggling,
6.
This
we're
is
struggling with
yeah.
that as well, right? I'm an example of assimilation, okay?
Right.
I was born and raised out here in the white community. Now, have I lost my culture? To some degree, but no, I really haven't. I do the powwow trails and whatnot.
Oh, do you dance?
I don't dance.
Yeah.
I just like to follow them and show up. But
That's beautiful.
right. So
Yes.
we've got two worlds colliding in the 21st
Yes.
century, and I like to say that Lethbridge is just in the perfect storm, because we've got pharmaceuticals and all these drugs hitting our city, but then we've also got this population that has made Lethbridge the Mecca.
Right.
The Mecca, not just for the drugs, but they come here not affording it. So it's become a Mecca for crime as well. I mean, we see property
Absolutely.
crime and
Absolutely.
home crime and personal crime just spiking,
right.
because they cannot afford what their addictions desire and demand of them, and so they're having to go out and break into these homes out at the lake and out on
Right.
the west side and whatnot, right? So there's a third component to this that the city, I don't think, has looked at to the depth where we can really get a handle on it. We have to devise ways to somehow greet these people from the reservation, get them here, and for lack of a better word, to assimilate them, right? And maybe for them to understand that assimilation is not the demon that the government has made it out to be, or that the books have made it out to be. I'm a perfect example of assimilation. I've worked and done everything in this white world, and I get along just fine.
Yes.
Absolutely just fine, right? There's so many barriers that we've brought up, and I shouldn't even say we, the government. I mean, it was a young government 100 years ago, and their designs were different for my people. All their little terminologies have stuck. We need to redefine what they've started. Okay, we're all victims of the government to that degree, and we're paying for that today. It's not just my people that are paying for their decisions. We're all paying for it now.
So just want to let you know, 2021, we're going to have a new election coming up, and I'm going to strongly encourage you to run for mayor or run for council, because we need change. We need people like you on council specifically, or even running as our mayor, right? Because we don't have, and sorry, I'm putting you right on the spot
No.
if you're not here.
There's
We need council who understands, who has, even just that background, but we also need people who have just that frontline experience, which you do.
Yes.
So in closing, we have to wrap this up. We've talked about addiction, we've talked about siblings and addiction, we've talked about sexual assault. We've talked about so much stuff today. And what I want to close with, Blaine and I always do, is what is your solution? What is your solution to what's happening in Lethbridge right now?
I don't know if there's any clear solution. This is never going to end. We're always going to have homeless people amongst us. With them being homeless, they're always going to turn to alcohol and drugs to console their situation and whatnot. I think what we need is maybe a new direction rather than a solution. I don't think there are solutions to this. I think we can just pick a new direction maybe to include more understanding, to maybe really get the right information out there. There's so much misinformation floating around out there right now, and people are just grabbing that misinformation and bringing it close to them and spouting the same thing. And they really don't know what they're talking about. So I think as agencies and whatnot, I think it's our responsibility to really take a look at what we know, because we are the experts, and bring what we know, say, to Johnny Q Public, so that they maybe have a better understanding. What I see we're lacking as a city is courage right now.
Yes.
We're lacking so much courage to really to really get involved, right? It was a community that helped me off the streets. It's going to be a community to help them off the streets. And as a community, we've just all pulled back in fear and whatnot. We need courage. And so we need to maybe get information out there and encourage likewise individuals like us to share what we've got to our neighbors. And encourage them to maybe see things in a new light, right? And so that's what I mean by new direction, is maybe looking at the old issues in a new light.
Exactly. And I really believe, and you spoke a little before about leadership.
Yes.
It's going to take a lot of leadership to get through some of these concerns that we have. And I know off camera we spoke about that and how important that is, because someone needs to help these individuals out, and it's just a help, effectively help them out, right? And I think it's that leadership that's going to be there to help them as they were for yourself with your program you attended, and I think that's so important. So we can go on. This is amazing. This is part one, and it's going to be a lot, and
so much information.
And Vin, I from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you. Thank you for coming and speaking on this podcast.
Thank you for your courage.
You're
and the
welcome.
courage, and I hope I didn't in the questions make you feel that you had to say something. I hope that you were comfortable in what you discussed.
Everything that I've said is said in absolute, complete sincerity.
Because it will help people.
Yes.
That will help people by sharing your story and the story of your family and even some of your friends in the past. Like this is unbelievable. We started off this podcast I didn't realize that some of this abuse would be part of this. And I'm so glad that it went this direction and that you were comfortable to speak that way, because this is going to help a lot of people. And so I thank you. And
thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to be here. So thank you.
We didn't even talk about your expertise in the field of FASD justice. So for maybe our next podcast, how about we wrap that up and let's share with it that we have an individual who has been diagnosed with FASD. Yes. That is giving back to the community, and I don't think there's anything greater than that. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to Connecting Your Community with Blaine Higgin and Mallory Christiansen. Join us next time as we continue to discuss community topics and how all of us together can make a difference. Remember, there is no community without unity.